Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for Mark Milroy's Artist Talk. My name is Lillian Day Thorpe, and I'm the director of Nancy Margolis Gallery. Today, Mark will converse about his paintings and his process with art historian Aimée Brown Price, who contributed the beautiful catalog essay, which you can purchase through our website. Based in New York City, Price specializes in 19th century art and is an authority on French painter Pierre Puvis du Chavannes. Beyond this, she also holds a noted interest in double portraits. Our spotlight artist, Mark Milroy of Brooklyn, New York, received his MFA from the New York Studio School, and earlier this year, he was awarded the prestigious Pollock-Krasner Foundation grant. His current exhibition, Between Metaphor and Meaning, is our second solo exhibition together, and it's on view through October 20th, both online and in Mark's studio by appointment. I'm keeping the introductions short today since there's so much to unpack in Mark's paintings, and I want to just jump right in. I will open it up to questions or comments from the audience at the end. You may type a question into the chat box at any point during the event, and I will read it aloud during the Q&A. And with that, let's take a look at Mark's paintings. Aimée and Mark, feel free to take it away.
I think that the first thing we should do is say to people that the images are online for this exhibition, and also Mark has a website where you can see other things, and also you can access the catalog online. Yes. But I thought first that for those who haven't had the time to do so, we could first just look at what is in the current exhibition, and then go back and I'll discuss with Mark the specific various paintings and how he got to do them, okay? So Mark, do you want to say the names, or should I say them as they go by, or it's everyone?
Sure, I'll go ahead and say them.
So, okay.
Poets and Painters.
So a double portrait, which we'll come back to,
yes,
which is of great interest to me, and so forth.
End of the Trail.
Again, we'll come back to that.
Theron and Statuary.
So very singular in terms of what this young woman, for me, very young woman, is surrounded by.
Leslie.
Again, a single portrait.
Waiting for Vincent. A Day in Maine.
Portrait actually of Lillian, so you can compare their faces right here now and their surrounds.
Greek mythology.
Which is a very large painting. So one of the problems of seeing things in Zoom, and you don't have the possibility of comparing the scale and size. So this is one of the largest.
Artemis and the Moon. Angus.
This is one of the smallest paintings, and this is of Mark's son, which we'll maybe get back to.
Yes.
One of his sons.
And the last painting in the exhibition is Aerialist.
Okay. So, Mark, should we start with the double portrait at the beginning and discuss it, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, so how did you come to paint it?
Well, over my birthday in last April, and these are two very close friends of mine, and they were sitting around the table. I knew I had this show coming up, and always one of the most difficult things with painting portraits is getting people to sit for you. So they actually did, in fact, have a bowl of cherries in front of them, and they were sitting, and it didn't take a lot of convincing, but they agreed for me to make a painting out of this scene, and that's really all it took. So we composed them that evening, and over the next several months, the painting slowly took shape. With the bowl of cherries wasn't planted with the intention of Augustan reference, but then over time, I just couldn't resist, and I sort of built this Augustan on the base of Piero and Giotto, which I thought was quite fun. So to give a little nod to a lot of my work, might give a nod to certain historical references in that context.
Well, for me, it's very interesting because I am very interested in double portraits. The way that you've posed the figures, and they're not just looking out at the viewer, and especially the encircling arms, and that they're separated from one another. And I'd like to get to that. But also after that, I'm going to ask you about the surrounds with the birds, which are a recurring motif in these paintings and many of the paintings. And so those two things to begin with, okay?
Yeah, so for the birds, that overall with the geese, age 10, my family moved to Canada. And so I use the Canadian goose almost, you know, whether if it's a direct metaphor or just a symbol, as this idea of migration. And then during the course of painting this painting, this couple actually broke up. And it was just kind of ironic that she's looking away. I put the geese in there for this idea of travel and to move beyond, and use the geese to represent this idea of going to another place in that regard.
Well, you also have the little wooden duck that appears in other of your paintings. And I was surprised to learn why you put in the duck. And I think the listeners would be interested too.
Well, you know, the duck was a gift. I think I got that when I graduated the 8th grade, and there was not a lot of promise for me academically. And so I received this duck, and I've used this decoy in a lot of my pictures. It's really hard to say, but this little wooden duck from my childhood has come to mean so much to me. Aimée, can you tell me what did I tell you the first time I talked about the duck?
Well, we talked about your childhood and how when you moved to Canada it was difficult because you had problems with your learning and so forth. And then finally, and your father was not particularly sympathetic to you, nor were the other kids in school.
No, not at all. No, I was one of these kids in my era growing up. I don't know if they still hold kids back or fail kids, but I failed the 2nd grade. I went back to school the next year with this promise of being the top banana, and I faced a lot of bullying, a lot of teasing. You know, I love my father, but he was not that sympathetic. It was more of the mindset of you don't try, you don't work hard enough, don't be a big dummy. And so the decoy, if we look on it as a decoy, maybe it's like this idea that, you know, if you're always trying and always failing.
That's interesting because my understanding of the duck was that he gave you, or your parents gave you in 8th grade, the small duck, maybe like this, as a kind of gift to say you had done something that was good and that you were getting an award. And I thought,
oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But it has many more meanings than that, and I think that's why I hold it so dear.
Now, what I'm also interested in, I'm sorry we can't move in on it, are the clasp hands of the two figures. And as they're beautifully integrated. If you could see the drawing for it or see a close-up, but I don't know if we can do that. But I was also interested that the fellow is looking out, as I said, and the girl is looking at him, but they're separated. And the separation is marked by clearly by the backdrop, which is we said after, and we're going to look at more backdrops, the kind of William Morris decorative motifs, but that you see the blue and white just separating them also. And it was interesting to me that you told me afterward that in fact this couple broke up, and I can see intimations of that.
I know.
Here.
I had no idea while I was painting it, of course, but it's kind of all there.
So this is one of several double portraits, but I think we should move on to the very next picture, because many of the motifs in this painting recur, such as the very colorful backdrop to what's going on here, and the idea of the end of the trail, which I think that you explained to me has to do, which is really a portrait. And I'm interested in the idea and the whole actually history of abstract portraits, and portraits of people, very specific people in American art, especially toward the beginning of the 20th century, which don't have the person himself or herself in the picture. So, but this is very interesting to me, and please explain to people who don't know what this is.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I painted this. I lost my father in December, and I painted this as a portrait of him. I remember when I very first started painting this, we're going back 30 years ago, I painted a portrait of my dad holding a great big fish from one of his fishing trips. And I had only been painting for about 6 months, and he looked at it, and it wasn't the most flattering painting. And he said, "So that's what you think of your father, huh?" And I don't think he really cared for it all that much. But when I came to this, I didn't want to paint a painting of him. I think certain things don't need to be so, demonstrative, I guess. And so I started to just draw upon my experiences with him. The fallen Indian on the statue was a gift that my father received from his boss, who was an art collector named Richard Manoogian, who had a massive, really a huge collection of Native and North American art. And so my dad received this as an award from working for his company, and it's a reproduction of the James Fraser fallen Indian. And so I received that, and
the name of that it has been known as the end of the trail. So
that is the name of the sculpture, which is I co-opted that for the title of the painting. And so I just started to think about my relationship with my dad and his life, and what things he seemed to hold dear and more from my childhood. And so I just started to piece this painting together, and it's a fairly large canvas, but to the left on the table. Go ahead, Aimée.
No, it has the dimensions, and I asked you about this, and you said you like to work on fat squares. So this is one of those fat squares. What?
Yeah, the fat square, definitely. Yeah, and so what I did for this tapestry on the right and left panel, there's an old photograph of me and my dad sitting. I must be about 8 years old, and it was the couch wasn't yellow. I invented that, but all this the pattern was the couch was this pattern, and I often look at that and think that's where it all started when I was about 8, and these pattern, and every house that my mom went into as we moved along, she would re-wallpaper all the rooms, and they were always in these colorful floral patterns, and I think it just subconsciously seeps into it. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say they're very vivid colors, which, and then trying to see what's true of your work through and through is the strength and the fully saturated colors, which are very generous in your work. And I'm just trying to see also what motifs carry through to other paintings and what's important to you and how deeply embedded they are in your own life. And again, the can or whatever it is with the some kind of plant. I don't know if it's an aspidistra because I'm interested in aspidistras because of George Orwell, but, and then you
Yeah.
told me the upper right had to do with your father's interest. Well, you should talk about it.
Yeah, well, my dad was, I don't know if anyone in the audience knows what curling is. So when you throw a big rock of granite down at a bullseye and try and land it on the button. And so he was quite a champion curler, and it was his passion and he loved it. And so when I came back after he passed, I made a woodblock print of the bullseye, kind of in memorial of him, and had it pinned up in my studio.
So many of these motifs are very personal, and it's interesting to see how they come up again and again in your paintings, and really are not merely geometric forms, but are really have a lot to do with your thinking. And,
absolutely.
but also looking at the ducks and the bird again, you told me something about the flying egret, which I found very moving, and again, fascinating, because unless you told me, I wouldn't have known. So I think everyone else would like to hear too.
Well, the egret I saw down in Florida was after he passed, and my partner and I went down to visit my mother, and we were having a conversation with him, and I don't know, maybe it was just timing or the moment, but we were talking about him, and this egret flew terribly close by, and we all thought maybe this is, you know, you see something and maybe interpret it however you want. Maybe this was a sign, but I made a little sketch, and knew that I had to incorporate this into the painting when I got back to New York.
And I thought that you said to me, maybe I should, that it was maybe your mother flying freely away after your father had passed away. But is that what I remember you're telling me?
I may have alluded to that as well, but no, well, I think it was more this moment of all right, is there something else going on here in the cosmos, in the universe? Is this a sign of you know, or however we're interpreting this image? But you know, I think we're filled with an audience of painters here, and when you see something and it's so profound or such a memorable image, I think that's when, you know, you need to hurry back to the studio and do something with it.
I think we'll look a little bit more quickly at some of the next portraits. And I'd like to point out some things with you. So we're looking here, particularly now you've all been introduced to some of the birds, and looking at the woman here who's portrayed, her turned head towards us. And I would like to focus on her expression and go to the next, looking, she's questioning us perhaps as much as we're questioning her, or questioning her being there. And then can we go to the next one? And here is Leslie. And notice also there's recurrent things that we'll get to, maybe of the, how would you say, the many dotted background? How would you?
Yeah, well, for me, I was trying to paint something of the cosmos, something of the night sky, but maybe, you know, we're getting all these amazing imagery now from outer space. And this is an old friend of mine from New York. She lives in LA now. Leslie, she calls herself an elder goth. And when she came to SAT for me, she actually had a pajama top on that had pictures of Ziggy Stardust all over it. and that was my initial impetus for the for this window view of the stars. But as I went along with the portrait, it didn't need all these images of David Bowie all over it. And
Right.
so I took them out and just left it as this.
For me, looking at it, just sort of parsing the pose and parsing the composition and so forth, I'm particularly, I love the decorative aspects of your work, the cosmos up above her in black and white, and the black and white designs coming down on her tattoos that ties the whole thing together. And then, of course, the beautiful way that you've done the wood behind her with its own designs. And if we get to, which I hope we do, some of your other work and how you've portrayed wood and logs and so forth, making them into a really interesting, adding not only the color to the whole, but in terms of the design. But here, looking at her face, seriously looking out, and remembering the one you did before. And can we look at the next faces too, please? Here with the figure turned away in front of a blackboard, which is again the black and white background with wood on the background and sort of motif. And in a minute, and we'll be getting to some of your other black and white blackboards. But again, there's a certain. Let's go to the next one, just in terms of Lillian and having things around her that have to do with her photography work and her interests. And again, the memento mori, the skull on the background. And so one more, because I want to get to some other things in a minute, is let's look at the portrait of Angus, the son of Mark. And what strikes me is not only the recurrent things, but in terms of portraiture, that I'm interested in the expressions in portraiture, of course, and how people present themselves, but also in non-commissioned portraits that people aren't showing off, but you're really penetrating their moods and so forth. And in all of these portraits, they're very interesting, and in Angus, a certain pathos, a certain melancholia, I think. And I don't know if you want to, and here, of course, the placement in this small personal, and of course, the intimacy is reflected in the size here. It's only 10 by 8. Of the placement of, you also have plants and vegetation, and thriving vegetation or not, or in here half hidden. Do you want to talk about those things, the surrounds, or what you tend to do?
Well, this painting in particular, my two boys, for their life when they're in my charge, I've grown up in my painting studio, and I had Angus situated as such, and he was actually darting to try and kind of hide from me after a while. When your dad says, "Hey, will you come and sit for me?" An 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, it's not the most exciting thing for them to do in the world. So I kind of put the plant there as this idea of the young boy kind of hiding behind the plant. There is a certain pathos with just my personal history of being a single dad. My time is precious with the boys, and you can really feel the time passing with them. And this small window of this age is it's moving fast. And so perhaps, whether if that's a conscious, more of a subconscious thing, really when I'm painting them, aside from a likeness, I'm really, really more trying to make a beautiful work of art first and foremost. Make it a work of art, and then if it's called a portrait, that's great. But I'm trying to make a really trying to make a painting, trying to make a beautiful work of art first and foremost.
Should we maybe look now at the largest painting? I think it's the largest of, yes,
The Greek
Greek
mythology. Yes.
And maybe you could explain, it's very different from the others, except that you have so many heads that are actually very expressive.
Yeah.
And maybe you explain how you came to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So many of you may know I teach at a girls' school called Marymount in New York City, and probably the best perk of the job is that my classroom is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I take the kids across Fifth Avenue from the school, and we go into the museum and into the education wing, and one of the I teach grade 3, 4, and 5, not for the faint of heart. So one in grade 5, they do a huge section called Greek mythology, and so over the last 5 years of this job, I think subconsciously going into the Greek and Roman sculpture court on a weekly, monthly basis, I started to look at these heads. They almost become, oh gosh, I wouldn't say friends, but you get to recognize them, and you get familiar with them, and slowly I started to have the kids make busts based on them, and I made wooden pedestals for the children, which there's obviously no wooden pedestals in the Met and the Greek sculpture court, but I started to make drawings when I was up there with them, and then the drawings led to some smaller works. And in my office, when I'm not with them, I had a marble head that I would draw, and so it just started over that. Tying the work into some of my other interests too. I gave a very much of this kind of like slate chalkboard. I wanted the Greek the drawings in the back almost to read as constellations, and so I put them on a slate chalkboard with a window going out into space. The lion in the front is actually Roman, and that has a dearness to me. One of my first times going into the galleries with my own 2 boys, my son Emerson went up and wrapped his arms right around the lion, and I got a picture of him doing that before the guard got it, and I have kind of fallen in love with that lion ever since. And it's almost like he's protecting all of this antiquity. So
I think it's interesting that I hope everyone notices that it's over 5 feet by 5 feet, and so it's imposing. But to me, in terms of antiquity and the heads, that actually the more you look at them, the more they really are not from a dead culture anymore, that they're all very much participating in posing as people do for you, and expressing all different kinds of expressions, looking out of the side of their eyes, which usually doesn't happen that often, I think, in Roman culture. Well, maybe Caracalla, but so it's really very interesting. Well, I thought we would go backwards, though, to see a little bit how you got from to here from there, and maybe we could look at some older paintings that are personal. And this painting, which again is 5 feet by 40 inches, 3.5 feet, is very, very personal, and struck me because you were saying things and making things. Many of the motifs you would repeat, and maybe you could discuss the family dinner.
Yeah,
and your own self-portrait among.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm the one with the box of cornflakes. And this, I think if there was if I could call it a painting that was a direct response to COVID, perhaps this could be it. I was missing my family. I hadn't seen them for probably 2 years at this point. They all
Could you
live.
identify the figures, and especially since you do your father in a certain very distinctive way, which you were to repeat again and again, maybe you could explain who's at the dinner table, because not everyone can see perhaps so well.
So we'll start at the top, which is my father, and then if we move clockwise, my brother Danny, who is, I painted kind of I don't know if Danny's in the audience, but if he is, we'll see what he has to say about this. But I think Danny was nicking cigarettes by the time he was in the 7th grade. So I kind of gave him this kind of pale green complexion. Then there's me. We were always into mischief with each other. If we go down the line, that's my brother Patrick in the red. He's the oldest of the family, left-handed. My memory served me that he always sat right there, so he wasn't elbowing anyone. And he still guards his plate today by putting his arm around it. My mother, now she swears she didn't smoke or drink at the table, but I wouldn't blame her. But my memory is that she always, at the end of the dinner, she had a cigarette and a big bottle of wine. We go over to my sister Callie, my sister Amy, and then my sister Sarah, who is the youngest. And yeah, so the backstory is, you know, it's very interpretations about how it happened, but I cannot, and no offense, but I can't stand spaghetti. I can't look at it. I don't even want to be in a room if someone's eating it. It just drives me crazy. People slop it up. It's their face. The noodles are get all wrangly. And so every single time my mom would make a big spaghetti dinner, she would place a giant box of cornflakes in front of my plate so I could kind of shield myself from the rest of the family. Most of the time I was in the kitchen with my back to the family. And so when I decided, I had these little sketches called the Spaghetti Eater, and I decided to turn it into this big narrative, which is part of a very big overarching project I've been working on for probably about, I think it's almost 10 years now of a series of narrative paintings, which there's a couple more that we can get to. But that's kind of just, the little poodle is our little family poodle that we had. I put him into the picture in the bottom right. You know, there's other things that are, yeah, go ahead.
The textures are so beautiful, and I don't know if people can see it. And you know, the texture at the back of your mother's hair, chair, her hair,
Yeah.
and of course the spaghetti. But do you realize in endorsing cornflakes like a sports figure, you can one day just become a zillionaire? Okay.
Maybe I could get on the box like of Wheaties. I was going to say behind my dad's head too. I was one, you know, I don't know if it's a strange attribute or not, but when I was a kid, I loved to mow the grass, and I would mow the grass this way, and then I would go and I'd mow it the other way. And sometimes I'd mow the grass 3 times a week, just to try and get a nice pattern on the front yard. And so I put that outside my dad's head. I still, if anyone has any grass they want me to mow, let me know, because I find it very pleasurable and meditative. So
of course it's wonderful to have this dinner table be in a vertical position, and upended as it is, we can see just what's on the table, as opposed to more standard perspectives where we wouldn't be able to see the spaghetti or any of the other things they're pointing out. So it's terrific. But I'd like to go also, this is, there's another painting that's very personal. You've done a number of, as we've learned so far, there's these paintings, all of them are more personal than one might understand it, just seeing them without having your explanations.
Yeah.
So I would like you to
Should we
show
look
the
at
one
the-
about, I don't understand, but also some of the drawings that
Yeah.
that relate to it. So can we go to the I don't understand? Because when I first met you, it was through, well, no, that's not true. You used to come to my class, but when I first saw your work, it was through this motif, which I really thought was so extraordinary. And the reason I did was because it is so extraordinary. And we've learned already that you have continued to use a blackboard, but this is one of the first ones that I've seen.
It
that
is. It's
uses
the
them.
first
So
one I
would
ever
you
made.
talk about it?
Sure. So when I underwent, I was at the studio school. I was really like, okay, it's time to paint these narratives. The backstory: when I was an undergrad at the Art Institute of Chicago, we had a teacher's assistant, and one day we were having a beer in my studio, and I started telling him childhood stories, and he said to me, and at that time I was painting portraits and still lifes and landscapes and city landscapes, and he said, these are the paintings you need to make, these narratives. It took another 20 years for me to get there. I think my painting language needed to mature so I could paint my idea. And this is one of the very first and one of the biggest narratives. It's 10 feet 4 inches long by 5 feet tall, and it harkens to that seventh grade kid who's sitting in the class, not understanding a word that's on the chalkboard. The beautiful thing about this painting, well, two things. I finally, if you look at the pinup that I painted in 2018 of Manet's Zola, I finally just got to see that in real life, and what a treat. And
It's currently at the Met, for those of you who
at
are
the
listening, for the Manet Degas exhibition.
the other pinup, which my pinups are very personal to me if I put them in a painting, is by Gauguin of Manu Tape. Did I pronounce that right? It's the spirit of the dead watching, and that for me is always like, if I use a skull, or if I use a that idea of memento mori, for having survived multiple heart attacks in my life. So that's another area where there's always meaning into the paintings. The beautiful thing with this, when I was painting it, we had, there were more shootings, more I think,
Disasters, yeah.
disasters, Trump, this, and everybody, when they would stand in front of it. And the most beautiful thing was, the gentleman that owns it, when he saw it, he said, "You just painted the story of my life." And I said, "Well, that's the story of my life, but that, to me, that's the greatest thing, because it can, anybody can bring something to it. People thought I was talking about the gun violence in schools. People thought I was talking about Donald Trump. People thought I was talking about, well, geez, and just about anything. So,
Now, I did, can I go backward though? Because going back to your dinner table, I did want people to see some of your sketches and notations.
these are the, so
because I'm lucky enough to have seen some of your notebooks. Although I know you said you don't always work from sketches, but for me, art historically speaking, it's important to see what the origin is of a work, but also how an artist changes and transforms. And for example, here you see your father at the head, but then of the table, and then you see him going into profile. And
Yeah.
those sorts of questions are interesting, of course.
Well, in the drawing, in the little tiny sketch to the left, and this is the notebook. They're those small moleskins, and you know, my brother Danny got the brunt of it because he was an arm's length of my dad, and you know, but so generally, what I was saying earlier.
You're talking about the physical brunt of something.
Yeah. It was not the most pleasant Sundays sitting around the table. If you drop your fork, you know, look out. So I don't want to make my dad out to sound like some mean guy, but he was tough. And
no, you have him in profile then, which is how he wound up. But do you have at the very end here, Lilian or Mark, what you've done with the head of your father that you now repeat over and over in terms of your print, or you don't have that with you?
I do. Well, you can see a little bit. Do we have the Volkswagen painting?
Yes.
Lilian?
Yep.
So yeah, so you can see my dad. The story is, you know, when we were kids, he drove a Volkswagen for a family of 8. And so he used to shove us all into the Volkswagen, and he had a comb over. He tells this story that one day he was working in Cleveland, Ohio, and for a company called Weatherhead, and he was out with his business associates, and the wind whipped up, and his comb over started to go crazy on him, and they were all laughing at him. And so when he went back to the office, he cut it off, and he's never had it since. But we always think of him with the comb over. This painting, you know, this car has such meaning. That's me and my brother Danny in the back, my oldest brother right in the front, next to my sister Callie and my other sister Aimée, and right there with a braid in between my mom and dad is my sister Sarah. And you know, it's one of these situations where when we would pull up to church and 8 people would get out, you know, as a young kid, you knew that they were laughing at you. But we also had so much fun. That's my rendition of the parking ramp at the Randall Park Mall. And for father-son time, my dad would take us to this parking ramp, and he would pop the clutch all the way up, and we'd almost feel like the Volkswagen was bouncing as we went up the parking ramp. And then we'd get to the top, and he would see if he could drive the Bug all the way down the parking ramp without hitting the clutch or brake. And we would see if we could make it to the bottom. And when you're a little kid sitting in the back cubby, that's quite thrilling. So
I'm sorry.
Ahead,
No, continue, but I want to get to the wheel, the color wheel in the middle there too.
Yeah, so this also, like I just mentioned how, you know, we would drive this to our Sunday church, and one of my things, the church was always having a festival. And so I wanted to, if you look in the very top right corner, there's a building with a little cross steeple on it. And so I wanted to use the idea of a Ferris wheel almost, without being so overt, but as a color wheel sitting in space. I was going through a very, very difficult divorce at the time. And if we can we go to slide number 10, Lilian? So I was using this motif in the center here of these acrobats as a metaphor for myself. And it was this idea in life, if when you let go, is there going to be someone there to catch you? Right? And so I started to use the acrobats. And then if we can go back to the Volkswagen painting, I put myself back in the picture in the top, right between the color wheel and that parking garage. coming down in a parachute. Just say you're going to land up and you're going to be all right. And I use that as another little metaphor for myself.
I know that time is running out, but two more things I'd like to ask you. I looked at your very earliest works, and maybe not your very earliest work, but earlier work before you went to the New York Studio School. And is there something you learned at the New York Studio School or the Art Institute before that, but I'm more interested in the New York Studio School because that's where we met, that changed the way you thought about your work or how you should go about it? I don't mean to make you sigh and breathe heavily. Maybe this is for another.
It's a big question. Well, there's so much. There's so much.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so much. It's, you know, for me, when I first got there, it was almost like learning a new language, of a language that I already knew, but had new words to describe. And so it's, you know, it's one of these, don't be, you know, a simple thing. Don't be afraid to go big. Paint a small idea huge, or paint a big idea even bigger. That whole idea of objects in space in relation to each other still echoes with me, of how, you know, the order of a canvas.
How the what? I didn't hear.
The order of a canvas.
What do you mean by the order of a canvas?
Composition, color, and you know, it's one of these. I think for me, the biggest thing that I took away from the school was never be afraid to paint anything. Well,
that's wonderful. Which brings me to, what are you going to paint next? Well, that you're not going to be afraid of.
Yeah, so I have plans for a series of paintings on saints, and so that's going to be a complete separate series. With
what do you mean what do you mean you put in for?
Oh, you know, it's going to be a separate series.
Oh, no, you don't mean it's a certain, it's not a commission or something then?
No, it's not a commission. Not a commission at all. It's so with the work that we've seen, definitely I'm as interested in ever in my portraits and my double portraits, and just this whole idea of painting a psychological portrait. I want to paint more landscapes. I want to paint more still lifes, and in my still lifes, there's a whole subcategory of paintings with books that I'm fond of, almost like a portrait of the book, or using the cover of a book as a way to make a transcription of another artist's painting, which I find is so useful and such a great learning tool. With these narratives, from the chalkboard to the dinner party to the Volkswagen, and
can we just look? I know that time is of the essence here, but can we look very quickly, just to give viewers who don't know your earlier work, just like one of the series, just to look at them for a few seconds each, either in the canoes, the boys in the canoes, or just to give people a sense of the range of your work. Can we go through a couple of those? And I don't know if there's time to comment. And
I have this one, which is his Pinafore series, so relating to canoes. And then I wanted to show this one, Fall, because Aimée, you had mentioned his log series. And I think it's a good example of one of those.
Yeah.
So those are the last two images I have in this slide.
Can I be seen too? I put on a necklace.
Let's see. Yeah.
Never mind. Okay.
You know, like with the canoe. So what I've embarked on, say 10 years ago, with these narratives, the chalkboard series. I believe there's 12 paintings in that series. With the canoe paintings, they're there are three major paintings with the, there's a whole, so with each painting, there's the over arc of the narratives, the very personal narratives. And then within that, there's bodies of work within that as well. Where I think it can work seamless too, though, where my portraits can hang with with my personal narratives as well. Like I see a connection, a beautiful connection between the portrait of A Day in Maine and the family dinner. And I see a connection with the family dinner and maybe the double portrait of the poet and painter. So there's still connection. Maybe it's through objects, maybe it's through palette. I always felt that this was a beautiful thing when I first began working with Nancy and Lillian, because I touch on so many. I don't just paint portraits and I don't just paint landscapes. And I said, they were very adamant, and I thought it was a beautiful thing that they said it's the way you paint is the thread that holds everything together. And I think that has taken me, my career to get to that point, so that these are my paintings. And that's really my bottom line. What I've been truly, truly interested in is to make my own work. So.
Lillian, is it possible to take questions or discussion or anything like that, or should we?
Yes, absolutely.
There's some interesting questions.
Yes, we have some amazing questions coming in, and thank you, Aimée and Mark. What a wonderful conversation. We have a few questions in the queue. I'm going to start with this one by Jeffrey. It's an observation/question. Mark, your portraits seem to be about your personal relationship with the sitters as much as the sitter themselves, in connection to how the sitter stares out to the window or out to the viewer or doesn't. Who is the main character in your paintings, Mark? You as you exist to the sitter or sitters, or is it the sitter as how they exist in your memory or mind?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's how the sitter exists in my mind. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. This one is by Cole. Mark, your paintings are very informed art historically. Numerous artists come to mind. There is also humor and serendipity, such as the bullseye and end of the trail, also serving as the emblem of the RAF. Could you comment upon these qualities in your painting as to your process or sessions in any one of the images?
Yeah, so the paintings will just evolve over time. Like when I started that canvas, and I started with this simple idea of dividing the space with two side panels, the window and the table. And I had small sketches where, at one moment I was like, maybe this will just be I was starting to think most of my still lifes were very small and intimate. Maybe I would paint a giant tablescape of some sort. And then as time went on, and as the painting started to develop, my vision became clearer and clearer, and it turned into what you see today. So then it's just, sometimes it's an additive process, sometimes it's to take away. Mm-hmm. So it could be both.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Robin asks, when you said, quote, I finally found myself with/in the language of painting, can you elaborate on how you found it? Was it through mark making or what you painted?
Yeah, so I think it's like, I think everyone more or less is subject or will take influence, right? And not every painter wants to talk about who influences this or that. I know that when I was young, I made a number of soutine paintings, and I know I went through a big phase of painting terribly thick, like Frank Orbach. And I think when, I think it's this, after painting, I don't even know how many paintings I've made, hundreds and hundreds or 1,000. I don't know, but after a certain time, your natural marks that you make are yours, and they become yours, and then you're not even thinking about it anymore. You're making your painting. Does that make any sense?
I think so. Yeah, that's beautiful.
I want to comment further that your paintings are so multi-layered that it's hard within a short period of time to show as many as would be nice and to discuss them. And I feel sad that we haven't been able, we could have just concentrated on one painting for an hour, and that would have been okay. We would have all learned and seen a lot more.
I can't believe it's already 11:57.
I know, there's always so much to unpack. I'll just go through a few more questions. Paula asks, how does the experience of teaching children affect your work?
Oh, I'm exhausted all the time. It makes every moment you get precious. Now, working with the kids is actually, I mean, it is exhausting. And so, but it's, it's pretty marvelous. You put the simplest materials in front of these kids, and they don't think about it. They just get to work and they make stuff, and they're excited, and it is infectious. It's infectious. Like I lead every new project with a demo, and I'll have the girls come up around me, and I start them off in the year making this name project, and inevitably there's one, and they're like, how are you so good? And I'm drawing a block letter. I'm drawing a block letter, and I talk to them about how we're so used to always writing our name without thinking about it, but now let's try to think about drawing our name and find your line through drawing your name. And I think that for me, that's the funnest moment of teaching, is when I show them, I give them the tools, and then I let them go at it. And they just, what am I trying to say? They work unabashed. They work from their heart. They don't let this get in the way, which, a lot of us painters, that can be a real crux if you start thinking too much.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to get to a couple more. Christina says, incredible work. Can you talk about invention in your work? Are your symbolic elements known in advance, or do some get added as problem resolution?
I'm going to say both. Problem resolution. Often I may use my plants in that regard. But then at the same time, like if we think about the painting the end of the trail, I use my rubber tree almost as a symbol to throw you back into the canvas with that branch that's aiming this way, but also the rubber tree as a sign of resilience as well. And so they can have both. Sometimes it could be just a pure compositional vice. It could be something to add color, pattern, texture. And it's good to have plants around in your studio.
Perfect. We're going to do two more quick ones. This one is from Gail. Half of it is a comment, which is bravo to paint whatever you want. I agree. And then she says, what does it take to draw as well as you do?
I think draw every day. For me, what I did was And Gail, thank you so much, because you're an incredible artist. I was always so insecure about my drawing abilities and I would draw only in charcoal, because there's with charcoal, there's a big fudge factor, right? You can smear and make it atmospheric and this and this. And a long time ago, I abandoned that, and I thought, what's the most difficult thing I can do? And really, it's just a pencil on paper, looking at an object and try and draw that. And probably been the last 15 years, I've just been drawing with pencil on paper. And I think that has informed my painting.
You have examples, Lillian, that you can show of his drawings at the end of the drawings as such, not just the sketches?
Yeah.
Right now,
No.
yeah, we only prepared the sketches.
Oh, okay.
Mark's website and his Instagram has some amazing examples of those drawings.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So.
Perfect. I know we're right at noon. I'm just going to squeeze in one short question and then we'll wrap things up. This is by Anne. She says, thank you for sharing your work via an interview. How many new pieces do you start and develop generally?
It could be anywhere from 1 to 15, maybe. And then I'll work on a few, and one will take over and you take it from there. And let's say if you run out of gas on it, you go on to another one, or if that's not working, you go on to another one. And it's always good to have multiple ideas, multiple canvases on the go, so that you walk in your studio. If there's not, then I draw as well. So, and I print make. Maybe a little bit of sculpture, but not a lot.
It's amazing how prolific you are with your teaching schedule. You do so much. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I try and work a little bit in the mornings before I go to school, and then I try and work when I get home. And the school was gracious enough to, not without a little pay cut, but I have Wednesdays. I take Wednesday off completely, and it's just a dedicated studio day. And we have you figure it out and you make it work. So, and I always tell people a little bit consistently will add up to a whole lot at the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the month, the end of the year. And then you'll have a body of work. Mm-hmm. So there's no real magic bullet to it. You just have to roll up your sleeves and get to work in your studio. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Well, it's very admirable. Thank you so much, Mark and Aimée. Before we sign off, just a quick reminder that Mark's exhibition is on view through October 20th. It's on display on our website in our online viewing room, as well as installed in Mark's Brooklyn studio by appointment. So if you'd like to see the works up close, if you're in the New York area, feel free to reach out to me or to Mark, and we would love to make that happen. We have a limited edition printed exhibition catalog, and this has a stunning, thoughtful, insightful essay by Aimée. This is available to purchase on our website. Thank you so much, everybody. I thought this was a fantastic talk, and feel free to follow up via email with more questions. I'd be happy to keep.
It's, by the way, I think it's recorded, isn't it, Lily?
It is recorded, so a full recording will be available next week on our website and on YouTube.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Lily.
Thank you, everybody.
Mark.